I'm going to talk about frog fishing and pretty much just do a frog fishing video. I hit 100 subs, so I think I should do something that pays kind of homage to what my channel really was about, and it's mostly topwater. I started my channel in May, so topwater kind of was a big deal at that time. So it seems fitting to do a frog tutorial. I've seen a lot of YouTubers do some, but I'll talk about different frogs, different brands of frogs, the gear for frogs, how to work a frog, setting the hook, all the technical stuff that they might leave out. First of all, I'm using a Shimano Curado K, but in the 8:5:1 gear ratio. And what that means is this reel is real fast, so it picks up a lot of line fast. And that's good when you're frogging, because when that fish grabs it, you want to pick up all that slack in your line and have just a real good like touch with the lure. Because if you set the hook on a slack line, you might miss the fish. The fish might have enough time to spit it, or you won't get as powerful as a hook set. So picking up that line is real essential when you're working a frog if you want to hook that fish real good. Because I'd say frogs and jigs are probably the worst hookup ratio of all lures I've ever used for bass. And right now I'm using this Scum Frog. I think the brand is Scum Frog by Trophy Lures. And some frogs they'll walk, and some frogs they'll hop. And this frog hops really nice. It hops. It doesn't really walk side to side, which I think really helps in heavy vegetation, because when it's dipping side to side, it's picking up little tiny bits of weeds. And this one will just slide right over that weed and just hop up and up and up like it's crawling over it, which is a good action for that. And that's really where I'd use this. I wouldn't really use it in the open water in a situation where I have low vegetation like this. And it's just not really a realistic frog either. Right in there. Oh, something just popped it. What I just did there was I dangled it in the tree, or I'm still dangling it in the tree, and then kind of just popping it like a frog, kind of trying to jump back out or grab a limb or something. Something popped it. It didn't seem like a bass. When the sun's high like this, the fish are going to be in the shade lines. They're not really going to be wherever all the light is. They're going to be near structure, near whatever they can cling on to. And frog fishing when the water's coming up is a really good imitation, because when the water comes up, all the animals that are on this little ledge right here, the water's coming up, so they're getting closer and closer, and the bass can get closer. And that's the time when more terrestrial things will enter the water, like a mouse or lots of bluegill action around here. Like a mouse or a frog might enter the water when the water's coming up. Just one thing to think about. Sometimes I mostly have good luck with frogs, when there's water coming up. Or sometimes it's just random. That's just how fishing is. But the vegetation it does have is kind of those overhanging limbs. And that's really where you got to target to look for these fish. And it might take a few bombs to get it out there, but if you really want to throw a frog real far, you're going to need a longer rod. And when you're frog fishing, the rod I like to use This rod is a 13 Fishing Fade Black in the 7.4 heavy, extra fast. And 7.4, that's a lot longer than your conventional rod. And the longer the rod you have, the further you're going to be able to cast. I mean, that's just how it works. And I don't think heavy action really has much to do with it. I don't really see that. I could cast a probably 7.4 medium heavy, maybe farther. There's more whip to it, but the heavy action on this is really good for a long distance hook set. This would, if a fish hit it right here, I'd consider this a long distance hook set. And the length of that rod and the action of the rod really would help me to set the hook on that fish, and if the situation happened. But another good thing about having a heavy oh god, there you go. Oh, he spit it. Dang. Sorry about that. Dang. Sorry, I really wish I could have got that fish. He felt big too. Well, that's just how exciting it was. I hit that tree limb and I just had a feeling something was going to happen. So, it means they're wanting it slow, that's for sure. Something going on back there. That was a decent fish too. Sorry I couldn't catch that for you guys, but just like I said, gotta be on your game with this, and wasn't paying attention. Might have got a late hook set on him, and he was able to spit that. Yeah, but anyway, that fish was about 15 foot off the cover, so that's well off the embankment. So don't ever give up on your frog, I mean, obviously, if it's like in the middle of the pond, I doubt anything would have hit it by then. But yeah, that heavy action, I think that dude got a little hung up in that little twig or whatever's down there. But the heavy action really helps when you're fishing algae or any matted vegetation, and you need to pull that fish out. That's what that heavy action really comes into play. And it also helps, it gives you a real rock solid hook set. And so yeah, that's mostly the gear part. Another thing, I used to use 50-pound test and 65-pound test. And the thing about those lines is they're great, they work, but some situations, some ponds, I need to cast further. And with 65-pound test, I really don't like casting all the way, like more than 2/3 of my line off. And same thing with 50, so I really switched down to 40, and I really haven't had a problem, not yet. And 40-pound test, you can cast it further just because the thinner line. It's a little thinner, so fish can't really see it as good, and it still works. It's still very strong. I'd say probably 30 is about the lowest you can go. I wouldn't fish 30 if you were fishing around algae or anything, just because you might have to pull in a lot of weeds. 40-pound, I think, is probably about, the best line I've used for frogging, and I've frogged a lot, and I guess I could say I know what I'm talking about, and I really don't have a problem with 40-pound test. So, you can go a lot of ways with what frog you want to fish, and to me, it really doesn't matter. I've fished probably every brand you could buy that's not really like a weird brand. KVD Sexy Frogs, Booyah Pad Crashers, Spros, Live Targets, the Scum Frog. There's a few others. Savage Gear's new frog. I got a bunch of those because they're real cheap. But out of all of them, it really doesn't matter. Whichever one is most cost effective, and to me, that's really the Booyah Pad Crashers. Here's the frogs I got in my box just right now. And if you think about it, right here, we've got the ugliest frog, most realistic frog, and then the most expensive frogs. out of the two most expensive frogs, which I would say are the Spro and the Live Target, if you're looking at them for like, why, I don't know why you wouldn't go realistic on a frog if you have the option. I like frogs more realistic looking. The Spros, the one thing I will give them, they got decent hooks, they got decent, good material. I probably caught like 25, maybe 30 fish on this. And it's still kicking. I mean, you can see slight cracks on it, but no punctures. The eyes worn off. Frogs have completely taken this. And I like this, if you can find them, if a company makes it, this kind of 55 size frog. I think 55 millimeter. Like Live Target calls it, they're 55. And I think this is, I don't know if this is a junior size, but they're both half ounces. Half-ounce frogs. I mean, that's usually what I go for. And that, kind of, those are the expensive option. Where if you have the money, I'd pull the trigger on them. If you don't have the money, what I would do, and I don't have that frog here, is I'd buy tons of Booyah Pad Crashers. Jeez. Over there, oh my goodness, there's just blow-ups central right now. But if you have the money, I'd get tons of just Booyah frogs. I mean, you could get, and sometimes you can get maybe 3 Booyah frogs for the price of just one of these Live Targets or Spros. But I would recommend just getting a Live Target or a Spro, just to have different variety, a different shape. Just slightly, really. Most frogs, I mean, they just have the same, like, do you think a fish really cares that this one's body looks a little more realistic than this? And it's always good, what I'd recommend is to have, a realistic frogs. This really just became a type of frog right here that is the kind of, instead of a skirted hollow body, they have leg frogs now. Now, this was like kind of the first big one. And then like there's like the Savage Gear, and there's other ones. To be honest, for as long as they last, and I say that for a reason, these ones are probably the best. They just look the realest to me, these legs. Out of all the fake legs I've seen, they just look, the realest. But the real problem with these is they're real flimsy. The plastic's not super strong. The legs, if a fish swipes it real good and gets a nice little nip of this, you can see how thin it is at the knee. I've got like 3 of these that just have the legs torn off, and I have to look it up, but I don't think that Lunker Hunt actually makes a replacement legs. So I don't know what the deal with that is. I'll have to ask them. And then you come down from, expensive, realistic. Then you come down to, this is probably, this is a pretty cheap frog, but this is mostly the ugliest and kind of the weirdo looking frogs. And these, for what they're worth, the weird looking frogs, they do have their place, but I really, I can get away with using these. I wouldn't, if you got too much money, or I don't know. I don't really like this frog too much just because it just looks so stupid. But I will give this thing, the design on this frog, this one in particular, I don't know about any other weird looking frogs, but the weight is lower than the hole and has this giant gaping hole. But what you never get with this frog is that you never have to like just squish it out to get the water out. And I think that's because it sits so flat. And if you were gonna buy one of these dumb looking kind of frogs, I'd go with this scum frog, really. At the end of the day, you'd have a frog